Louise, I'm one of the hosts of this meeting, and Cara, who will introduce herself in a minute, is another co-host of this panel. We are students at the University of Oxford studying Chinese, and we are also members of the UK-China Film Collab Future Talent Programme. So this panel makes part of the Chinese Cinema Season, which is the largest online film festival for Chinese language films in the UK and Europe, and is co-presented by Trinity Cine Asia, Filming East, and UK-China Film Collab. So the Chinese Cinema Season is a great website where we have loads of different Chinese films and documentaries, and I really recommend that you take a look and watch some of them. So far, we have done 6 panels about film collaboration between the UK and China, and if you've missed any and you would like to watch them, you can check them out on YouTube. This panel in specific is opportunities for documentary filmmakers to enter the Chinese documentary market. So what we hope to achieve with this is demystifying the production process of working in China and giving you an idea about what the experience is really like. We believe that there is a big market for documentaries either for China or about China, and UK-China Film Collab hope that we can help this market to kind of be tapped even more than it has been already and help people to take their first steps into this industry. So without further ado, I will pass over to Cara, and she will introduce our amazing panelists and kick things off.
Thank you, Louise. Hi, everyone. I'm Cara. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to introduce our fantastic panelists. Firstly, we have Arthur Jones joining us here today. Arthur is originally from Yorkshire, but now he lives and has his own studio in Shanghai. He's been working on film in China for the last 20 years on both independent and big company projects. Most recently, he's directed The Six, which some of you might have heard of. It's a documentary film about the 6 Chinese survivors of the Titanic. The documentary is critically acclaimed and has won a number of awards, as well as being nominated for Best Documentary at Hainan International Film Festival. We'd like to talk a bit more to Arthur about the process of making this documentary later. Our second panel guest is Patrick Carr. Patrick is the CEO and founder of Mandarin Film, which is a Beijing-based production company, crucial to get that word correct. It was founded in 2006, and Mandarin Film now has offices in Beijing, in Hong Kong, and in Bangkok. And they've produced over 500 projects internationally. He's worked with a number of international partners, including Netflix, the BBC, CCTV, Tencent, and many other online platforms. Patrick has worked on many ambitious projects, including the award-winning TV series, globally released feature documentaries, and Hollywood films. The final panelist that we have with us this afternoon is Michael Wood. Michael Wood is a documentary filmmaker and historian who began working for the BBC in Manchester in the 70s and first went to China in the 80s. He's worked on many amazing documentaries on a range of subject matters, but most recently he's done some mega projects in China, including The Story of China, which actually is the reason me and Louise both got into Chinese studies in the first place. So we're sort of fangirling over here, which was made with the BBC. And that was hugely successful both in and outside of China, as well as Du Fu, China's Greatest Poet with Ian McKellen, which actually Patrick helped to produce as well. And most recently, he's worked on How China Got Rich, which is currently available on Amazon Prime. So we're very excited to hear what our panelists have to say today. We'll begin with a discussion that will be led by myself and Louise. And then at the end, there will, of course, be a chance for you guys to ask any questions that you might have. So yeah, let's get started. I guess, Patrick, I think I'd like to start with you because I know you've done sort of so many amazing projects, both for UK channels and Chinese channels. I guess just be interested to sort of find out, when you make a documentary for both a Chinese audience and a UK audience, how do you have to adapt that making process to sort of suit both audiences?
Yeah, when you sent me the sort of the questions that we might ask, then I had a little think about it, and I think actually my answer is a little bit sort of twofold, because I think when I first started doing sort of co-pros, we do a lot of production services as well, but it's the same idea, which is sort of helping foreign film and TV crews shoot in China, and often those films will end up getting shown in China too. But when you're doing co-pros, obviously the Chinese, there's the UK side and the Chinese side. Sometimes there's a third side as well, and they're all going to want certain things from the film, from the finished product, and they're all sort of slightly different. But when we first started, I'd say that actually the Chinese broadcasters were maybe slightly less sure about the international market, and were sort of willing and excited to sort of be a part of the process, and mostly sort of left a lot of the decisions about kind of the casting or the script or the edit. Those were left more to the sort of international partners. But what we've found more and more in the last few years, especially the last 2 or 3 years, is that the Chinese broadcasters are more confident, I guess, and have more kind of, they're more aware of their own audience and what they need for their audience. So I think that's been a really quite a big change, and quite a welcome change as well, because it's nice to have broadcasters who sort of know what they want, although that can sometimes sort of throw up issues that you need to sort of work through. I'll give a couple of examples if you like. So we did a show called Earth One Amazing Day, which was actually a feature film that was shown in theatres in China and then overseas. It was a co-production between BBC Worldwide and SMG Pictures in Shanghai, and it was an interesting process because we were involved in the filming, and then we're also involved in the post-production. We actually did 2 different versions in the end. We did a Chinese language version and an English language version. And you know, there were the usual things. I think we had different narrators. So we had Robert Redford did the sort of the international version, and Jackie Chan did the Chinese version. There was definitely a kind of a need to find someone that someone for the Chinese audience that they could relate to, and that they could have felt could sort of lead them through the film. With the script writing, there was a lot of back and forth as well, because I think there's just obviously there's a sort of slight difference in the sense of humor. There's obviously some cultural references, and I think probably the Chinese version, I think in the end the international version tended to be a bit more on the kind of wildlife David Attenborough kind of science angle, with some humor in there, and then the Chinese version, they went for a slightly more cute, kind of, oh, this is the sort of cute animals and wildlife in there. And then maybe Michael Wood can talk about this, because we did a co-production between the BBC and CCTV on Du Fu, the greatest poet, and I think on the whole that went really well. There was Michael can elaborate a bit more, but I think there was the usual sort of a few small things, maybe a few visual things that work in the kind of the sort of filmic language, visual language in the West that doesn't work in China. But I would say that it's probably a lot less than you think. It's a lot, the sort of some of the issues that you come across between an international and a Chinese audience. But Michael, feel free to contradict me if you want to.
No, I wouldn't contradict you at all, Patrick. I think it's interesting. I think I remember sitting around with 1 or 2 potential Chinese collaborators about 6 or 7 years ago, and media people from Beijing Normal University as well, and we all kind of met up by the North Lake, and they kept asking these questions about we want to learn about how Western documentaries are so successful in making you feel, as well as in giving information. And of course, you tell them the really obvious things, which are that all films are a combination of words and sounds and music and pictures, and it's the combination, and sometimes the timing of the music and the words and the pictures that make you feel. And that was one of the areas where, at the time, they were, the Chinese, as you know better than me, but the Chinese commissioners in general really want to get Chinese culture on Western television. They really want that. They would like it to be made by Chinese filmmakers, but they're conscious that, brilliant as Chinese movie makers are, that in terms of documentary style, you've put you nailed it down with that. There's a different documentary style. Although some of the Chinese documentaries, I always loved Bite of China, for example. I mean, I think that was our kind of filmmaking in a way, wasn't it? You know, the food series. But they're interested in how you make people feel, and a lot of the response to the story of China online in China, there was a huge discussions online and in the press, was this thing about you know, how was that sort of inexplicable? I think Xinhua said, you know, there's an inexplicable emotional thing, and people were saying, oh, it makes me feel so this or so that. And I think that's the area where they were particularly interested in. But yeah, good documentaries work in any culture, don't they, in a way?
Yeah.
That's
So
right.
interesting, just sort of seems to be that there's a slight stylistic negotiation, but essentially on both sides you're kind of looking for the same thing. You're looking for that essence of feeling. That's so interesting. And I guess that's kind of
I would also just say though that in my experience in China, and it's a unique one, and maybe I'm wrong in sort of, it's hard to speak in generalities, but I think the other thing that we came across, Michael, I remember, was that the CCTV were very concerned about the experts that we were going to use, and making sure that we had the absolute best experts who really knew their field and were the top of their field, and absolutely kind of the best people we could possibly get, unimpeachable kind of like qualifications. And I think probably in the West that we've sort of moved away from that a little bit towards more kind of entertainment. So like you don't only want your kind of talent, we call it talent, your experts to be great at their field and masters of their field. They have to be able to really explain it and kind of show it and make the audience understand it viscerally almost, and I think and also sort of make the audience want to know, you know. So I think there was a little bit of a back and forth, I remember, about that, because I think also CCTV, it was CCTV 9, I think they tend to get a lot of flack from their home audience when, you know, the remotest, smallest detail, if it's not 100% factually accurate or 100%, you know, on the right line of whatever it is, that they will just get sort of so much kind of backlash and sort of blowback from that they were kind of really worried about that. Whereas I think you know, I think possibly the Western style is more, even in a documentary, it's like, well, where's the story? How can I tell this story? And how can I kind of really move people with this story, rather than kind of like getting really kind of fixated on making sure every single fact is correct. I don't know, would you agree with that, Michael?
Yeah, absolutely true. I mean, I think you know, we choose experts, don't we, who are good on TV and who've got a feel for it and can advance not only the story, but the mood of it. And you can have really great experts, as we all know, as documentary makers, in every conceivable field, who are great at their subject, but very poor at putting it over. You know, they can be teeth-grindingly detailed, and you lose the audience. So that's an area of debate for even making documentaries in the UK. But I would absolutely agree with that. And they were very concerned about their experts. Although it was quite amusing that they I remember a big Chinese academic here saying, whatever, of course, you know, you've got to have Stephen Owen. You know, and we were looking for the Chinese experts, but they insisted you've got to have Stephen Owen. You know, but anyway, no, that's very true.
That was the other thing with it, wasn't it? Because I think in the end we did manage to find the middle ground, didn't we, with Dufu, that we found some really great experts who could also, you know, communicate well. But I think that the interesting thing was with Dufu, and probably with a lot of UK China co-productions, was that I think CCTV felt that, you know, really if they wanted to make a documentary about Dufu, they can do it. And there's a million documentaries, I'm sure, in China about Dufu. But in many ways, they wanted to hear a Westerner and tell it from maybe an international perspective and put it into that sort of international canon. And that's where you came in, Michael. And that's also where Ian McKellen came in when he did the kind of readings from the Dufu text, because
that's right. Yeah.
Interesting, I think, for a Chinese audience to see deep Dufu in a different light and in this more.
We were a bit concerned as to whether we should absolutely have a Chinese actor reading the stuff, you know, but CCTV would quite like the idea of an A-list star from the West. And the funny thing was that so many people online in China were going, I loved Ian McKellen and he looks just like Dufu.
Yeah. Whereas I think actually we were on the other side of that, weren't we? And especially in the UK last year with the climate of Black Lives Matter and all that. And suddenly we, you know, it's like, well, why didn't you have a Chinese actor?
Yeah.
That was another example of sort of getting caught in the middle of these cross-cultural things, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess this cross-cultural negotiation is one of the challenges. But I guess I sort of wanted to ask Patrick, are there any other sort of challenges that you would say are sort of particularly big when facing the challenge?
I think shooting in China, logistically, it's always, you know, complicated and you know, can be challenging. It's probably the same in many countries. But you know, I don't think it's certainly not insurmountable. I think probably one of the big challenges is going to be, well, look at the new kind of, you know, what's going on in politics right now, and the sort of, you know, this seems to be constant kind of issues and maneuverings and things like that, that, you know, as documentary makers, we don't want to be a part of, we're not a part of, but that kind of over our heads, these things are moving, and sometimes that can lead to more challenges. But yeah, I would say sort of, you know, you need to just be really aware of what the cultural differences are and how to sort of navigate those. They're certainly not insurmountable, but you need to be aware of them. And then probably just this sort of logistical thing. I mean, in China, it just takes a lot of planning to do these things. So you need to leave yourself to do that.
Yeah, and I suppose, is that something you sort of learn as you made more and more documentaries, or sort of negotiating these cultural differences, or did you find that you, from the offset, you needed to just be getting as much advice as possible, or do you think it was kind of a process of learning step by step?
Yeah, certainly a process of learning. I think if you can find the right people who can work with you on the project and who understand where those potential issues or you know, hurdles might be, that's the key.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I think let's try and get Arthur involved in the conversation. So we have mentioned the 6 already in the introduction, and we would like to show everyone the trailer. So I will try and do that now, and then we can have a little chat about that. So, okay, does it work? Yep. Okay, great. Here we go.
Stories such as that of the 6 of them survived. Really that much information.
I'm looking at the origins. What was the true version of events?
Titanic, it is a Chinese story. They were kind of shuffled off and hidden, you know, kind of expunged from the records and so on.
Those stories are very well documented for almost every single one of those survivors. But the Chinese are almost uniquely unknown.
He may have been the last one that was saved. That became the inspiration for how Rose was saved.
The last person rescued from Titanic is Chinese.
Where did they go? What happened to them?
They deserve to tell their story as much as any other survivors do.
其中有个人好像知道很多关于法王这个人的事情。
Yeah, right there.
He's maybe the last person rescued from Titanic.
Oh my God!
They were there and they lived it. They're out there, we've got to go find them.
Okay, honestly looking so good. So let's Yeah, I guess maybe do you want to introduce the film a bit and just kind of maybe the beginning of the process, how you found the story, and things, something like that?
Sure, yeah. I mean, this is a film that I made with my collaborator, Stephen Schwankert. And it's the second film we made with a sort of maritime history background. We did a film about 10 years ago looking for a lost British submarine off the coast of China up in Shandong Weihai. And so this was a sort of follow-up in a way. And Stephen had mentioned to me some years ago, 5, 6 years ago, that Titanic had Chinese people on board. And I thought, well, that's kind of odd. I've never heard of that. But I didn't know where we were going to take it. And it felt like such a big story. You know, it's Titanic. And do I really want to make a Titanic film? Is that going to be the one that I make next? No, something that's really well plowed as an area. But the more I told people, friends of my local friends and my Chinese friends of mine, about the story, the more people said, well, you have to tell that. I mean, that's just a big hole in the middle of the Titanic story. And so in a way, it was that sort of perfect combination of being a sort of well-known theme, a well-known frame, and then right in the middle of it was something that was really unknown. And I love making films that have a big mystery at the middle of them. I like making films about something where we don't know where it's going to go as we film. I am a director, sort of a director for hire. I work for the BBC, I work for Discovery, local channels as well. And obviously it's a different sort of setup there. And we shoot them pretty quickly and efficiently, and we essentially script everything out. But this was one of those projects, an indie project, slightly different from what we were talking about earlier, where we sort of shape it as we go. And our driving value was just, what can we find that's new? What can we bring that's never been discovered before? Because there's such an excitement in doing that and then do it on film. You know, one of the first questions I always ask is, and I'm sure you have this, Patrick and Michael, as well, is, you know, when somebody says to me, let's go and do this, I always say, well, what can we actually film? You know, what's going to happen while we've got the cameras out? And sometimes you have to manufacture that, and that's interviews and all the rest of it. But in this case, it was just one of those great stories where early on, I sensed that we were going to find things, and we could just put cameras there and see it being discovered and meet people who didn't know they were connected to the stories, and find families and find descendants. And I think exactly what you were talking about, Patrick, earlier, you know, finding a sort of emotional heart to it. Because for me, that's, you know you're on the right track when you can feel that. And, you know, when you feel there's sort of an emotional story going on, it makes the filmmaking process feel very smooth and very natural. And in this case, that's exactly what happened. So I've always done commissioned work for broadcasters, but in the background, I think for the last 15 years or so, I've always had one or two indie projects that that trickle over time. And the way we put them together is a little bit complicated financially, and how they happen. It never happens the same way twice. But that's how this one happened. It was sort of organic, and it felt very natural. And somehow 6 years on, we're a couple of weeks away from it releasing in cinemas here. So it's you know, it sometimes works out. It's not always this easy, and it wasn't that easy. But in this case, it sort of came together. So yeah, I mean, this was an example of when it feels like the right subject, and it feels like the right time for it to come out.
Yeah, and I wonder, we spoke briefly about this before, but if you would tell everyone about the funding and how you kind of secured funding for it, because I feel like that's quite different from the big kind of BBC, CCTV kind of productions.
It's a very different thing. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily different here to anywhere else, which is just there are no rules to finding independent funding for a project you pull together as a team. You either move into that broadcast model and take it to a broadcaster, or you scrabble around and try and find other ways to put money together. I've had films funded before by, you know, film foundations and documentary money. I've crowdfunded films. I've had broadcaster money come on board a film. In this case, it just got its own momentum. Stephen and I put the idea for the film together. We did what I normally do, which is to shoot a trailer earlier on and make a treatment, just so we can show people. You know, when you're not in the world of a formatted program, you've got to kind of show people in a shorter length as possible what it's going to feel and look like. You can tell the story as many ways as you like, you know, face to face, but you got to show them that you have an idea for a look of a film, and the way it's going to feel when people watch it, and that kind of emotional connection the film's going to make with an audience. So we made a trailer. We'd done some work. I had some bottom lines. I said, if we're going to make this film, we have to find descendants. Otherwise, we don't really have a film. So we have to find different descendants, and then we have to find some things new that we're going to bring into the story. So when the next book about Titanic passengers gets written, they're going to write the Chinese guys in, because we found out things that people didn't know before. And that happened fairly quickly in a few months. We started pitching it at festivals, and we had a stroke of luck, which was in 2017, I think, towards the end. A Chinese online platform called Li Shiping, which is a Pair TV, somehow came across our trailer. I think it was on Facebook, and downloaded it, they extracted it and put it on their channel, on their platform, on Weibo. And overnight, we had one of those sort of China moments when you wake up in the morning and all your friends are texting you and saying you've got 40 million hits and you're trending on Weibo and everyone's talking about it and the press is trying to get in touch with you. So we had one of those moments. And the other stroke of luck was that in, I think 2017 was around the time when the Chinese film 22 had just come out, which is a film about the Chinese comfort women used by the Japanese army during the Second World War and the invasion of China. And it was a very powerful film, and it played in the cinema here. And so I think because of that, and it did very well, really reached an audience. There were Chinese distributors who began to think maybe there's a type of documentary that would have a place in theaters here that could do a cinema run. And we had long conversations about it. We talked to TV, we spoke to CCTV and others, and everybody was very enthusiastic. But suddenly it made sense that this might be a film that could work in theaters. And I think it's to do with, and this is my pennyworth on this, but I think it's to do with films, documentaries have to have a certain kind of resonance, I think, to work on the big screen. And in China, I think the natural fit is something that's going to contribute to a way of talking about China, that it's going to say something that's a sort of national story, something that feels like sort of reinventing something or rediscovering something, and then it can reach an audience that kind of makes it must see. You know, it has to have those kind of bones to it. And people, you got to see this because it tells us about this thing we all thought we knew but we didn't know, or it tells us something about who we are and where we came from. And so this just happened to fit that mold. And so at that point, we got quite a few theatrical distributors came to us and said, don't sell it to TV, bring it to the theater. And because if you take it to TV, you then can't play it theatrically. Not if you want to make money. You can play it just because it's good to play and get an audience, but you can't make money that way. So they came on board and covered a lot of production costs. And but it was a great sense of safety. So about halfway through the project, about 2 years in, we got the money to essentially finish it. And we struck a deal with them. And as I say, that's about to happen. And we had to get the Longbiao, the dragon seal that allows us to release it here as if it's like it's a feature film. So it's cleared in the way that a movie would get cleared, which is a very different process to the way a TV would get cleared. And then we also have an international distributor for everywhere else outside of China. So it's a very different model and not one that I'm used to. But this sort of trying to find your way through it is something that over many productions I've come to discover that it almost never happens twice the same way. But somehow if you keep going and you keep being persistent and it's a story that resonates, it tends to get made in the end because someone's going to find it somehow. I think it just involves being very, very stubborn, which is something I think people who make documentaries get used to being, and just not dropping projects and telling the story over and over again until people sort of get what you're trying to say. But yeah, it's been an extraordinary experience making this one.
Yeah, no, I really, really want to watch it at some point if I can, for sure. And
well,
yeah,
it's out nationwide on the 16th. So it's in all. I'm told it's in every cinema, but who knows? So it's nationwide, every city in China, and I'm told every cinema in China. So it's out on the 16th.
Amazing.
And it's it's I don't know if I'm more nervous or more excited, but yes, it's something very new. But for a documentary for me.
And will there be any I guess overseas release or UK release, anything like that?
Yeah, I think the nature of a Longbiao is you tend to play them first in China. That's the,
Yeah,
you know, I think there are exceptions, but it tends to be that we do a China run first, and then we do have TVF International is our international distributor, and then they'll take it out. So we're just on hold until it comes out in China. But we've had a lot of interest and some big broadcasts and so on. So we're waiting for that to be the next step. Yeah.
Amazing. So I guess maybe both you, Arthur, and Michael could answer this, but yeah, like maybe what was your kind of specific experience of filming in China? So not necessarily about the planning or the kind of directing, but like, yeah, the experience of being in the country, I guess.
Do you want to go, Michael?
Me, you mean Louise? Well, I first filmed in China in the late 80s, and I always loved filming in China. Actually, I mean, I've probably made about 15 visits since 2013, and friends of mine said, "Oh, you must be really glad that's over," when Du Fu had finished. And actually, I always loved coming to China. I feel kind of home from home. The people, as you all know, are very, very sociable, and it's great fun to be there. And of course, people are passionate about their history, really passionate about their history. And I've maybe it's thanks to working with people like Patrick, it was smoothed the way. But to be quite honest, I've never really had any problems with filming in China. You know, they've never asked to see what we're going to say, except when you're in Tiananmen Square. Well, if you're going to do a piece to camera, they want to know what you want to say there, and they want it on paper beforehand. But otherwise, I mean, even on Story of China, you know, after we did about probably 10 trips altogether, long and short, and after the first 3, they said, "Oh, we won't bother sending a stooge to supervise you because we trust what you're doing." And so it's actually a real pleasure, you know, a real pleasure. I mean, there are differences, you know, with a film crews here, you can take a lunch on the run with a sandwich, but 1 minute to 12 with a Chinese crew, they're kind of right. The restaurant's set up. We've got to have nobody does without a proper lunch in China. You know, so you learn these things. You know?
That's with the meal times. That's the key. That's the key takeaway from this.
Yep.
Most important piece of advice from the panel, everyone, is the meal times have to be set. Michael, it's really interesting actually, because I know that you're obviously known for working with some really big channels, doing a lot for the BBC. And I suppose has that sort of, do you think working with such big partners, and I mean BBC is kind of very much linked to the UK as a nation, do you think that has affected your experience working in China?
Well, I've worked with others and not just the BBC, and the BBC has a kind of mixed reputation in China, especially at the moment. And in fact, when Story of China went out and it was first pirated online, every episode was up online within 24 hours, 36 hours with full Chinese subtitling. And there was a lot of comment initially about how the BBC would depict Chinese history, and a lot of suspicion. But they knew we were independents. People rapidly said, "Oh, but they're independents, and he's not BBC. You know, I'm not a BBC staff member." So, and then people took the series on its kind of face value, you know, and they also, in terms of what Patrick was saying about experts, of course, one of the things we did was, which was nearer to Bite of China than to civilization, was to actually have members of the Chinese public constantly engaging with the story. You know, oral stories in the back streets of Kaifeng, legends, stories, pointing this and that out. So the people themselves became witnesses to their own history. And the Chinese audiences loved that. Somebody in one of the online debates said, "Look, they're showing what we're really like, that we're really fun." You know, and I thought that was almost the best testimony I had for the series, to be honest, you know.
Yeah, that's what you want, definitely.
But yeah, I've not had a problem filming in China. The only thing is now, I think things are getting tighter, and I can say that. But if you were doing anything on a political basis, I think it would be more difficult. And there are certain kinds of documentaries you literally can't make in China. You know, been working for a long time on a book of the story of China, and it came out here and in the States and elsewhere in the autumn. And the publishers in Beijing said, well, you know, they really liked it, but the last 2 chapters can't be published in China. So that there's a cutoff. And I've just been dealing with CCTV about doing a film about the 1793 embassy of McCartney to China. It's the first moment of an Anglo-British, Anglo-Chinese diplomacy. And it's a fascinating example of cross-cultural meeting, cultural misunderstanding. Henrietta Harrison, who's your professor in Oxford, he's just got a book coming out on the Chinese translator in this embassy. And it's an absolutely great story. But it's still, with all the implications of that mission and the eventual Opium War in Hong Kong and everything else, CCTV, despite the fact that you'd think 1793 was relatively uncontentious, actually involves major problems for them. And it got sticky to the point where, well, we've withdrawn for the moment on it, because I don't really want to argue in advance with CCTV when they should at least trust us as filmmakers and our editorial position. I don't really want to start arguing over individual facts and interpretations before we've even started, you know. So there will always be issues. And I absolutely agree with Arthur. I think his thing about finding stories that really relate to the Chinese audience and their sense of themselves, and that's which Story of China did, you know, and Du Fu did, of course. You know, Du Fu's, everybody learns Du Fu at school. So and I think the Chinese audience were quite interested to see what a Westerner might, how we might tell the story. But I totally agree with Arthur. I think that's a big thing if you want it to be seen in China. Although you may, of course, want to make documentaries where you're not worried whether it's seen in China or not, and that's a different matter.
Yeah. I suppose you'd be missing out on an absolutely mega market if you were deciding to make one that just completely disregarded the Chinese market. But yeah, that's really interesting. I suppose I'm aware that I'm sure our audience would want to ask some questions, but I do have kind of one more question that I'd love each member of the panel to sort of answer. And it's just basically, if you've got a company or a small independent who is sort of keen to make a documentary about China, to go out and film there, is there sort of a main piece of advice that you would say you would definitely give them if they were considering making a documentary about China? Let's say, Patrick, we start with you if you've got any.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say enjoy it and stick at it, because making documentaries is not easy, and in making documentaries about anything is not easy. I think making documentaries about China is, and trying to do a sort of co-production, you know, it's just those challenges that we talked about before, that, you know, there are cultural differences, there are political differences, there are, you know, different ways that people see things, and, you know, you're going to have to navigate your way through that. But you'll have an amazing time along the way. You'll have an amazing time in China. And so just enjoy the process and get on board as many people as you can who can help you, who know more about things than you do, who are experts at things that you aren't, and you'll find your way.
Yeah, I guess building that knowledge base is really important. Arthur, do you have any advice that you think is?
Well, I don't know if it's advice, just an observation. I think it's very easy for to reach certain assumptions about China, but all of us who make documentaries, you know, we pick up cameras and we point them at things, and then we hope something's gonna happen. And there's something I suspect that Michael and Patrick will share this, because it's something I see all the time. But there is something wonderful about doing that in China. There are lots of countries in the world where I've shot, I'm sure you guys have shot, where people are much more cynical, and where when you pick up a camera, everyone either is completely reserved and won't say anything, or has a story to tell and it feels like they've told it 100 times and you're not getting something fresh. But I've had this experience so many times in China, where we were led into someone's house with no permission by someone who's with us, a friend of a friend, and we walk in, and within minutes we're hearing the most extraordinary story told with the most incredible openness in somebody's living room. And it's just an extraordinary thing. And for all this is a career we've chosen, and we might have done it anywhere, and you can do these things anywhere. I think it's really worth remembering that China has this, I don't even know what the word is. It's not innocence, or I don't know what it is, but there's something about taking a camera out, and it's not always the case, and sometimes you can't do that. But there's so many times it's happened to me, so many more times it's happened to me here than in lots of other places, where people have just been incredibly open, and it's almost like they don't even know that I'm filming. It's that thing where you sort of disappear, and people are incredibly genuine, and it's just, it comes out of nowhere, and it blows my mind. And every time it happens, I know I'm doing the right thing in a place that's the right place to be doing it, so that's what I'd say. Just don't forget the joy of doing it, and that China does have a lot of those moments.
I think that's right. I
think we might have lost you there, Patrick.
Sorry, I was just saying, endlessly fascinating place, and somewhere that will surprise you at every turn. And I think even 15, 20 years, I am constantly surprised by China, and in a good way. And often go back to a city that I've been to maybe 5 or 10 years ago, and it's completely different. It's changed so much. And also, there's just so many stories, such a rich history, rich culture, that you tend to just, as a documentary maker, and therefore someone who loves stories and interesting things that maybe you never heard before, it's an endless source for that. Would you agree, Michael?
Absolutely. I think you're guaranteed to get great stuff. As Arthur was saying, with the Chinese people, it's just a fabulous experience filming there, and it always has been. So just my advice is exactly the same as Arthur and Patrick. Enjoy it, do your homework, be respectful, enjoy being with the Chinese people, and try and put yourself in their shoes as far as you can. You just can't walk in as a, these two live there and know this very well. I'm an outsider, but don't just walk in there and point a camera. You just, empathy is a very big thing, and there's a lot of coldness towards China in the world at the moment, and the Chinese people. And I found when we showed the films in new versions of the story of China in the States, that, for instance, New York Times reviewer who loved the story of India sort of wheedled away at it being too nice to the Chinese. That was their main TV critic, as if somehow reflecting a kind of coldness towards China. And that's, go with an open heart and you'll have a fantastic time as a filmmaker.
Okay, amazing.
I just say, the reason one of the big reasons I got into filmmaking, I studied Chinese at Oxford actually, and really felt that there was, I went to China, and having read things about China in the West, I went to China and actually discovered this completely different place to work, to everything I'd sort of read and heard about. And that was one of the reasons why I ended up getting into filmmaking and documentary making, because I feel like, it's just, China's such a big place, an important place in the world, and people need to understand better and learn more about what Chinese people think and what China's really like, not how it's often portrayed in the Western media. So I think that's a really, we need more collaboration, we need more projects, we need more co-productions, not less. So I hope that anyone watching this will be inspired to go and do it, and I'll certainly be, I think myself and Michael and Arthur will still be plugging away and doing more and more stuff, because it's endless, the source material and the endless fascinating stories that are in China.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important part of what UK-China Film Collab are all about. And yeah, this idea of, can we see China through another lens? It's not a political lens.
So I think I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap it up, because that's all we've got time for today. But I would just like to thank our wonderful panelists. It's been amazing to hear from all of you with like such a wealth and breadth of experience. And also, obviously, thank you so much for the audience for joining us today. I hope that
thank you.
maybe learned something, got something from the conversation. And do check out everything else that's going on with the Chinese cinema season. And yeah, I hope that everyone has enjoyed the panel. And thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you,
guys.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Great.
Bye-bye.